Hey everyone, my name is David Hassoun. I am the co-chair for the SVTA Advertising Work Group, also the dean at the university for the SVTA, and I have a little bit of consulting I do through Muxed Consulting. I'm really excited to talk about nonlinear ads, and the title of this is The Shortest Distance to Successful Streaming. Ads is not a linear line. So let's get going. For decades, we've been promised that streaming ads would be better than what we've experienced throughout our life and the wonderful world of advertising as we traditionally know it. Yet we're still here, still forcing users through the same linear interruptive experience, and ultimately, it's not great. We know it can be better. We've seen what we can do, but there's still something that we fight against. The bathroom break during ads isn't a feature, it's a bug. Right? We do not like that. It's not creating the engagement that we want. Viewer frustrations at an all-time high. Ad avoidance behaviors are continually on the rise. CPMs under pressure, and ultimately, we're sacrificing the user experience for revenue, and that's a short-term risk with a long-term negative effect. So, what can we do about this? Well, let's see if these actually play. I don't think they're going to because I can't control anything. So we'll just skip over to a screenshot of it. IAB has been focused on some of the new ad formats and what is happening within nonlinear. And these kind of show kind of four main things that are really kind of coming to surface on that when we talk about nonlinear. We have things like overlay ads, pause ads, pullback ads, L banners. So when we say nonlinear, this has already been kind of a term that's had frustration, like, well, what should we call this? Is it concurrent ads? Showing ads while we're showing content? Ultimately is what we're talking about. That it doesn't have to just be, hey, I go from content, I go to ad, I go to ad, I go to ad, I come back from the bathroom, and then I go and I get to resume my content. So alternatively, we now have additional formats that we can really work with, but there's challenges, of course, with that. So what we're going to kind of talk through a little bit is, what it takes, kind of the choices that kind of go with that, the standards. So there's three main standards groups that are focused around this, how they're kind of working together or not, and what we can achieve with that. And ultimately, but why? Why should I care? Should I build this? Should I buy this? And ultimately, is it worth the investment? So what's it take? Now, I only have about 12 minutes of total, so I'm going to go a little fast, but hopefully not too fast. And if anyone has more questions, feel free to come chat with me after. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes of questions at the end too. As it starts off, if you're looking to integrate with nonlinear, the first thing you need to do is kind of pick your solution, or in this case, pick your fighter. You want to go blue, you want to go red. Ultimately, the two main routes are looking at a server-guide ad insertion solution or a more traditional server-side ad integration. Now, if you're using server-guided, that's ultimately where you're going to be combining the client to do more of a little bit of the work, but still having the server guide that. Signaling can be done through SCTE and either directly into your playlist, handling at the client, or with an ad service. Resolving is generally be either client or server, depending on your situation. And then rendering is going to be at the client. And that's one of the key differences with SGAI as a whole, is that all the ads are going to be rendered there. Beacons happen at the client, which ad fighters like a lot better. When we talk about rendering, I have highlighted here, if you want to do interactive stuff, a good solution here is one of the specs that we'll also talk briefly about later on is SIMID. From IAB, which allows you to do interactive ad placements and an updated approach. I didn't push anything. There we go. Benefits, we have a distributed system, so it gives us far better scalability. We have full control over the dynamic layouts, since we're doing this at the client, and easy failover to content. If there's a problem within our ad system, it isn't likely to take down the whole stream. That can happen with SSAI. But it would then just fall right back to standard content. Challenges usually need a dual decoder render if you're doing things like a pullback ad, where you have an ad on top of your content and it's a video ad. That can be a big issue. Not all devices support that. Apple, Roku, some people actually use those quite a bit. That can be a big issue. So that's a limitation that we have to figure out what we can do and what we can't do on those, and how do we want to cover that. And same thing in that kind of route, it creates a lot of fragmentation for us. Now with SSAI, the signaling is once again going to be fairly similar. It's all going to be kind of generally recommended, do that kind of SCTE base in the playlist. Resolving will take place all at the server. Rendering is where things can get tricky. Ultimately, you can have two kind of approaches if you're doing SSAI and a nonlinear. You can go with the heavy-handed approach, or you can actually, edge-based or otherwise, transcode or encode and composite your video onto it to still create a single stream that goes down, but that's a heavy compute, especially with the level of personalization. Or you can try to draw that experience back to the client when you have that. So you can still do, hey, I'm going to see an ad marker, I'm going to resolve that, determine that I want to do an interactive, and for instance, if you want to do an L banner, you can still draw your video back onto the client and show your L banner with that with SSAI. It takes a little bit more work, a little bit of functionality that you do have to put into your client to be able to do that, but you can make that work. So you can signal your nonlinear ads even in SSI, but then you're still drawing that experience back to the client, and you have to build that out there. But for existing systems, and if you limit it to what is supported in more of a single rendering route, then you can look to do that. Beacons are generally going to be always at the server, but they may be client as well. Benefits, ultimately, SSAI is a core solution that a lot of people are using that today. That is kind of the default standard for larger systems. Avoids more ad blocker issues as well that you can run into still with SGAI. However, if compositing can be a benefit drawback, benefit is you still have a single stream, but it's definitely a massive amount of compute, which can affect your scalability and can be limited in what you can actually achieve with that, especially when you talk about personalization. And then, of course, if you're doing a kind of composite approach with SSAI, you have a big implication potentially for your latency, if that's a major concern, because you're doing more processing. Now, there are really cool, more advanced solutions, especially when we talk about new codecs and what's going on there. So you could look at actually trying to do slices and fragments within HEVC, AV1, or especially AV2, and try to pass that type of video stream along and tack that in without doing a retranscode. But these are kind of the more bleeding edge kind of solutions that could work, but are more driven towards very new codecs, which then you run into the same implications of, hey, I got these really cool new features that I want to use, but I can't use them everywhere because not everything supports it. So standards, why do we care? Well, standards generally should be making our lives better. If we have a lot of this stuff worked out and we can learn from the mistakes and challenges and bleeding of others that have been willing to detail that, create a unified solution, it makes it easier for adoption. So when we look at kind of the standardized journey for what we're looking at, we have ad markers, which is going to be largely kind of controlled by the SCTE specifications. Those go into playlist signaling, which the SVTA has taken on. We already have the Gen 2 spec of that done, working on the version 3. Ad servers, so we're talking about things like VAST and so forth. That's going to be done by IAB, and they have quite a bit going on there, even in the new realm. And then back down to the rendering, which is also something that the SVTA has been taking on with our new specs as well. So if we look to see where things kind of are, SCTE side, there's kind of three main specs that kind of apply. There's the core SCTE 35. That kind of defines the main binary messages, allows you to specify your ad identification, insertion information that you want. There's SCTE 224. That provides kind of the out-of-band mechanisms for scheduling. And this can be really key for nonlinear events, good for things also like pause ads and so forth. We're also looking at how we can integrate things like layout information and how to present these ads within that spec as well. And then SCTE 214-1, the MPD constraints and extension. Not something I've worked with a lot, but it's something that can come into play with it in this. Ultimately, what we're working to try to do is also try to bring these specs together. Specs are great, but also sometimes, since they only handle a certain part, it leaves an incoherent journey. So when we kind of think about that steps that I was showing, one of the challenges there is that unless they actually work with each other, it starts becoming a problem. So one of the things we've been trying to do is actually make sure that we're collaborating between these. So the SVTA is working with IAB and also with SCTE to help try to bring a cohesive journey to make sure that everything can line up. Now in SVTA, version 3 specification is underway for the signaling. This allows us not only to identify how we want to signal, but also now how we can bring out layout data for these nonlinear ads directly within the specification for both HLS and Dash. We're working on that right now. I've put together actually a reference sample application. Allows you to kind of specify, hey, I want to do a ad overlay up on top. You can see that. I can specify my anchoring positions, the scale that we want to contain it within, stacking, padding, and it will automatically generate out, in this case, HLS asset list, which now has some new information around how we can control the layout within here. And we see this primary layout structure. And then it also will show you exactly what the rendering will look like in different specifications that you want to show, if you want to show for vertical layout or landscape. And you can see it dynamically render, adjust on size, and give you all that detail. So we're doing this to try to help also visualize this to move the spec along and let people see what it would actually look like and work like. And then also looking to then integrate this into things like the Common Media Library, CML, so that if people want to use this, it can go even faster. If anyone wants to see this, I have this only on my local. I'm going to be getting this posted up on the SVTA here soon. I have some more features I want to add to it. IAB has a few different key specs. They've been working on as a new initiative called the Ad Format Hero. They've specified out, okay, these are I think they had like 6 or 7 kind of key ones that they really wanted to focus on. The ones that actually pertained to the kind of more streaming realm were the linear ads, pause ads, squeeze back, overlay, and L-banner. Now, there's also VAST4, which is being updated now with key information that they've identified within the Ad Format Hero initiative. So when we say, hey, I want to do an overlay, we now have details on the default layout that we want to use, how we want to be able to apply it, and they're flowing that data back into VAST as well. So this can follow all the way down the chain. Also, with that note, we're lining up with the SVTA as an example that, hey, when you say, I want to do an overlay ad or an L-banner ad, it lines up with the default specifications with the IAB. You can still override it for custom experiences, which is, of course, very powerful and necessary. But this way, by default, everything lines up from spec to spec. Last but not least, I mentioned SIMD, and this is a little graphic showing that. SIMD ultimately is just using iframes. You use an iframe to be able to put interactive content within your ad for an overlay experience, and it sandbox it from a security perspective. Of course, the device of which you're going to render that SIMD ad still needs to be able to support iframes and that web experience overlay, although most generally do. But ultimately, we have to ask about why. A good friend of mine who I've worked with for many years, Sarge Sargent, he always was great at kind of coming to a problem and saying, yeah, but why? Why do we actually care? Why do we want to do this? Is this really necessary? And ultimately, it goes down to, is the juice worth the squeeze? So why are we here? Or where are we exactly? We're kind of, in my opinion, exiting the experimental phase. A lot of the major companies out there are starting to roll out or have rolled out nonlinear ads in one form or another. The data has been really positive. We see better enjoyment, recall, likelihood to skip is decreased, and perceived value overall is improved based off of sentiment analysis information. Easy wins are good to call out. Pause ads and L banners. These don't require dual decoders and video surfaces. These are things that you can do today, and pause ads is a good example of, hey, when I pause the ad or pause the stream, I can see an ad that shows up. It's a good opportunity that it's just there. If you're not utilizing it, it's kind of a wasted space. So why not? L banners are a benefit because they offer really cool contextual integration of advertising without too much overhead, although it's still going to take that client implementation. Adoption barriers are things around the standards. Ad sale and formatting, that's actually been a bit of a challenge. Like, great, hey, we could do these really cool nonlinear ads, but if I'm doing programmatic, nothing has actually been sold to be able to leverage within there. And also this goes into personalization. Like, hey, great, I can create these better experiences, but I just don't really have very good personalization information or inventory, and that creates lesser experience as well. And then technology investments balance out with the technical limitations. So ultimately, build versus buy. What's better? This is something that we run into all the time in industry, right? You can build it all. You can have that full control and customization that you want, but it's going to be a big investment. You can buy faster time to market. You can have better proven solutions, but you kind of run in with that vendor lock-in, or you can, of course, do a hybrid. When we say build or buy, there's two main areas. We have both the client side, the actual experience, and that's where I lean towards being a video player developer for many, many years. Like, hey, build that, right? There are some good solutions out there today from the commercial realm and even open source that can allow you to do these nonlinear experiences. But to me, that's a good area to investment. But when it comes to systems and the back ends and your ad delivery and so forth, most of the time you're always going to be leveraging existing systems, and those are a good route to kind of do the buy. So you can look towards your hybrid approaches as well. Ultimately, is it worth it? Well, when we see things like 3x engagement lift with nonlinear formats outperforming the interruptive ads, 40% lower skip rates versus concurrent ads, and a 2x brand recall, with things like context-aware placement. The value is truly there. It's just a matter of how do we line up our technology, our limitations across these different platforms that some support the things we want, some not so much, and how we want to build through that. Thank you. I had 2 seconds on the clock, I'm just saying. Any questions, or we got time or no? So the question was the adoption of SGAI and what we've seen in the field. And SGAI growth has really been increasing. You are seeing further adoption. It's a bit of a challenge. Ultimately, right now with SGAI, it's not a, hey, if I go to SGAI, I can do that everywhere, for the most part. There are ways that you can kind of do a little bit of that, but there are definitely limitations. With things like Roku not supporting interstitials and so forth, that creates this limitation. So it's fragmented. Now, where we see adoption is you start with one kind of key platform and then it grows, or you cover what you do. But ultimately, it's still a hybrid approach. There are benefits, though, that you can do an SGAI-based ad, for instance, integrate, and you can have the same ad marker work for SGAI and SSAI with a single manifest, which in our past hasn't always been the case, that you can do that type of stuff. And that can be a big benefit for that adoption where you can, when you can, and then you can segment out by different platforms.
Yeah, I do have a, I mean, if you want a question, you will pass the mic. I have a question about the context of the ad, meaning now it's with AI, it's possible to understand if the, if the content is sad or scary or anything like this. And there is no standard now to pass this information to the ad decision servers? Is it something?
And we're working on that.
Okay.
So the metadata work group at the SVTA, they've been looking to tackle that. We started something within the ads work group that kind of got stalled out. The metadata work group took that over and was also looking to collaborate with IAB on that, which also has some stuff. They have a new paper that's going to be released here soon. Part of the challenge there is, once again, as many things are in the industry, a lot of things are fragmented. There are different things out there for how you can determine contextual sentiment and all that stuff within there. Yeah. But trying to unify to a single system that we all can leverage is where we have some limitations. But ultimately, that is where we want to go. If we can understand the content better, what's happening within there, and provide more contextually driven personalization as well, creates a high better value and retention for users.
Okay. Hey, David, thanks for this. Could you talk a bit about the interplay of concurrent ads with ABR and what challenges that presents?
So ultimately, if you're doing concurrent ads, especially in the video sense, hey, I have now 2 video streams. How does that affect my ABR? And ultimately, that comes down to how much of is an ABR truly an issue. Will Law has actually done some great presentations in the past showing that actually things don't switch very often. There is oftentimes a surplus of bandwidth, although we have this wonderful large ladder of complexity and stuff to go along with that. And hopefully I'm not misquoting anything well. This was, I think, done at Muxed a number of years ago and showing some of the value of CMCD. So there's the question, is it truly a problem? But let's assume that you are running in a bandwidth fluctuation or negative environment. That is an implication that you could have to consider. And ultimately, you need to prioritize your content, that ABR. And if you don't have more advanced logic in there, you could have conflicting ABRs where they're both being impacted when they don't necessarily need to. This shows where we can definitely improve how we want to control stuff and what we can control from ABRs within our player APIs. Last question.
And additional questions in terms of the concurrency. So some devices like Android have some limitation on the decoder side. So in one time you can use only one decoder. How you solve this one?
So that's the biggest challenge, is that there are a number of devices that only have one decoder. And you can do that through either more complex and heavily compute, edge-based, for instance, compositing, that you then have to transcode, which can be way non-realistic if you're trying to do full personalization. Or you look to limit it to, and the devices that only can support one decoder, you could limit it to just things like L-banners that don't have 2 videos. You can still do graphical elements for contextual ads and so forth around that, or companion ads. but that's a big limitation that we have right now. All right, right now is if you only have one video, what can you do with it? As I mentioned, there are some more advanced solutions around what you could look to do on newer codecs, being able to provide in things called like slices or tiles, that you could have that was still within one stream and it still uses one decoder. But there are limitations within that right now, especially on HVC, AV1, AV2 looks more promising. Please change everything I just said.
10 seconds.
No, I just want to add that we actually preload ads in a virtual buffer. And once we do the switch between main content and advertisement, we can basically take things from the preloaded buffer and put that into the main buffer. So that's one way to avoid having two decoders. You simply preload stuff, and it's already there, and then you do the switch at
But still, you're limited to one display render at that time.
But you overcome buffering challenges.
Absolutely, yeah. There's definitely more advanced routes for handling how you want to sequence your buffer to have seamless play out.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.